I've never thought I'd be the kind of guy to get blindsided like this. I've always prided myself on being straightforward, honest to a fault maybe, but that all shattered a couple of weeks ago. It started with something I noticed, something so small, so innocuous on the surface, that I almost missed it entirely. But once I saw it, everything changed. It was a rainy Tuesday morning, dark clouds hanging heavy over the city, the kind of day that makes you want to stay under the covers and forget the world. I was just coming back from a funeral. My father had passed away unexpectedly, and I'd been trying to keep it together all week. I'd barely eaten, and my hands still trembled from the emotional exhaustion. I remember walking through our apartment, feeling the weight of grief pressing down on my chest like a ton of bricks. The funeral had been packed, a sea of faces, but I couldn't focus. My mind kept drifting back to the last conversation I had with Dad, the way his eyes looked at me that morning, full of pride. I was trying to hold it together, clutching a cup of coffee when I noticed my wife, Lisa, standing close to my best friend, Tom. They were whispering, their heads bent together like conspirators planning a crime. I didn't think much of it then. Maybe just a moment of comfort in a tough day. But later that afternoon, I found myself wandering into our bedroom. I didn't even realize I was doing it until I saw it. A crumpled receipt shoved under the pillow, half visible. I pulled it out cautiously, and my stomach dropped. It was from a hotel downtown, paid for in Lisa's name, with a check-in time that matched the wedding anniversary dinner we'd had earlier that evening. The problem? It was paid for the night of my father's funeral. My fingers trembled as I held the paper. The ink was smudged slightly, but the date was clear. The same night Lisa and Tom had been whispering in the church yard. I looked around, my eyes narrowing. The room was quiet but full of little clues. I found her lipstick smudged on his shirt collar during a quick glance in the mirror that day, and her perfume still lingering in the air when I entered the bedroom. It hit me like a punch to the gut. The whole time I was mourning, they'd been sneaking around behind my back. I felt my heart pounding, fists clenched so tight my nails dug into my palms. How could she? How could she do that to me, especially now, when I was vulnerable, broken, trying just to get through the funeral? I stayed silent that evening, but inside everything was boiling. The betrayal wasn't just in the act, it was in the timing, in how callously they'd done it while I was lost in grief. I kept replaying the scene in my head. The whispers, her lips on his shirt, that little fake smile she threw my way when she saw me walk into the living room. All of it made my stomach churn. Since then, I've been going over what to do. I want revenge, something cold, calculated to make her see she can't get away with this. But I also want her to feel the pain, the same gut-wrenching feeling I had when I uncovered it. I don't want her to think she can just cheat and walk away free, especially not now. So I started planning. I've been gathering proof, screenshots of their texts, copies of the hotel receipt, even some pictures I managed to take when I caught her in the act. The more I dig, the more I realize how deep the betrayal runs. And the worst part, I'm just getting started. Right now, I'm sitting here in my apartment, holding the evidence in my hands, knowing I have the power to end this. I've decided what I need to do, and it's not going to be pretty. But if she thinks she can stab me in the back and walk away like nothing happened, she's dead wrong. So I'll ask, what would you do if you found this out? Would you confront her straight away or play it cool and gather more? I need to know if I'm missing something, if there's a smarter way to handle this. Either way, I'm done being the fool who gets kicked while he's down. I spent the night staring at the evidence I'd gathered, her hotel receipt, the text messages, even a few pictures I managed to sneak when they weren't paying attention. It felt surreal, almost like I'd stepped outside my own life and was watching from the sidelines. My stomach kept twisting, a mixture of rage and disbelief. How could she do this? How could she betray me, especially now when I was at my most vulnerable? I couldn't sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw her face, that smug look she had when she thought she was getting away with it. Or worse, I'd picture Tom's stupid grin like he'd won some prize. That's when it hit me. This wasn't just about catching her cheating. It was about making her feel the loss, the betrayal, the hurt. She needed to understand exactly what she threw away. By morning, I knew what needed to happen. I wasn't going to confront her right away. No, I needed a plan, a way to hit her where it hurts, without giving her a chance to spin excuses or deny everything. I decided on a slow, calculated approach, one that would make her realize she couldn't keep pretending she was innocent, that the damage was done, and I was finally ready to fight back. First, I set up a fake email account, something anonymous, something she wouldn't suspect. I started sending her little messages, casual at first, almost like I was testing the waters. Then I escalated. "I know what you did." I wrote one morning just to see if she'd bite. The delay was killing me, but I had to be patient. I couldn't let her catch on too soon. In the meantime, I contacted a private investigator I'd found online. It was a risk, but I needed more concrete proof, photos of her sneaking out of the hotel, maybe even a video. The idea of her lying her way out of this made my blood boil. I wanted her to feel cornered, exposed, vulnerable. If I could catch her red-handed again, I'd have enough to show the world and to use as leverage. I also made a list of all the ways I could retaliate, publicly, privately, or both. I wasn't interested in some petty revenge, but I wanted her to feel the loss of respect, of trust that she'd shattered. A part of me secretly hoped she'd beg for forgiveness, but deep down, I knew I'd never want her back. Not after this. She crossed a line that couldn't be uncrossed. One afternoon, I caught her in a rare moment of honesty when she slipped up, her voice trembling, trying to cover something. I pressed her on it. "Who were you with last night, Lisa?" I asked, voice steady but icy. Her face paled and she hesitated just a second too long. "I was just out with some friends," she said, voice cracking. That's when I knew I had her. The game was almost over. The next step was to make her see I was serious. I had the evidence I needed and I was ready to use it. The only question was how. What's the best way to make her feel the full brunt of what she'd done? I wanted her begging, crying, realizing she'd lost everything. But I also knew I had to stay in control. No matter how much I wanted to lash out, I had to think smart. I called her into the living room that evening. Her eyes darted nervously like she knew I knew. "We need to talk," I said, voice low and steady. She sat down, trying to act nonchalant. I pulled out the pictures, the hotel receipt, the screenshot of her messages. Her face drained of color. "Care to explain?" I asked. She stammered, trying to deny everything, but her words sounded hollow. "It's not what you think," she muttered, avoiding my eyes. I felt my jaw tight. "Oh, I think I know exactly what it is," I said. "And I think you're about to learn what happens when you betray someone who's already lost so much." Her hands trembled as she reached out, but I pulled the papers away. "You're done," I said quietly. "We're not going to pretend this didn't happen. You can choose, tell me the truth now, or I'll make sure everyone else finds out." Her eyes welled up with tears, but I didn't care. I was done pretending to be the naive husband. I had a plan, and I was going to see it through. I knew she'd try to wiggle out, to lie her way through this, but I wasn't going to give her that chance. I'd set the wheels in motion, and soon enough, she'd realize that revenge isn't about violence or threats. It's about making her feel what she's caused: pain, loss, and a lesson she'd never forget. Now, I just had to wait for the right moment to strike fully. The pieces were in place, and all I needed was a little more patience. Because when I'm done, she'll wish she'd never crossed me. I spent the next few days watching her closely, waiting for the perfect moment to execute my plan. Every morning I'd wake up with a knot in my stomach, knowing what I'd uncovered and what I wanted to do. The adrenaline mixed with a strange sense of calm. I'd finally taken control of the situation, and it felt like standing on the edge of a cliff, ready to jump, knowing there's no turning back. Meanwhile, I kept up the charade, acting as if everything was normal. I made small talk, pretended to be interested in her day, but really, my mind was locked onto how I'd get back at her. I also kept in touch with that private investigator. The photos they were gathering were shocking. Her sneaking out of that hotel late at night, her pretending to be innocent when I confronted her in the living room. It was more than enough to destroy her if I chose to go that route. One afternoon, I finally decided to push her a little further. I wanted her to slip up again, to see her desperation. I waited until she was sitting on the couch, scrolling through her phone, trying to look innocent. I leaned against the doorframe, watching her. "So Lisa," I said casually, "who exactly were you with that night? The one you said was just friends." She froze, her fingers stilling on the screen. Her eyes darted nervously like she was debating whether to lie or admit it. "Just a couple of girls," she mumbled, voice barely above a whisper. I stepped closer, narrowing my eyes. "You're not very convincing. I already know the truth. I have the pictures, remember." Her face went pale. Her hands fidgeted in her lap, guilt or fear, I couldn't tell which. "Look, I didn't want to hurt you," she whispered, voice cracking. "It was a mistake. It meant nothing." That made my stomach turn. I felt a surge of anger, cold and sharp, but I kept my tone even. "A mistake? That's what you're going to tell me after everything. You cheated on me during my father's funeral. You snuck out, lied, and probably thought I'd never find out." My voice was steady, but my fists clenched at my sides. She looked down, tears pooling in her eyes. "I was confused. I was scared, you have to understand. I didn't mean for it to happen, I swear." I shook my head. "No, you had plenty of chances to tell me, Lisa. Instead, you lied, you sneaked around, and you used my grief as an excuse." I turned away for a second, taking a deep breath. "You know what? I've had enough of your lies. It's time to show you just how much you've screwed up." That night, I got to work. I crafted a message from the fake email account I'd set up. I told her I knew everything: the hotel, the texts, the pictures. I explained that I was tired of her playing the victim, that I was done pretending I didn't see her for what she really was. I told her I was coming home early the next day with a surprise. Her reaction was priceless. The panic in her eyes, the way she started pacing, mumbling excuses. She begged me to listen, to forgive her. But I'd made up my mind. This was just the beginning. Next, I contacted the investigator to get the latest photos. I wanted her caught red-handed, not just a vague suspicion. As I waited for the pictures to come through, I planned my final move, something that would leave her no room to deny, no chance to save face. I wanted her to see the full extent of her betrayal and realize she'd lost everything. The next morning, I walked into the apartment with a folder full of undeniable evidence. I found her in the kitchen, nervously stirring coffee. I placed the folder on the table and looked her straight in the eye. "You're done lying," I said. "Here's everything. The hotel receipts, the pictures, the texts, it's all there. You can lie, deny whatever you want, but I'm done being gullible." Her hands shook as she tried to grab the papers, but I pulled them back. "You're going to have to face this. You think you can cheat and walk away, but I'm not the fool anymore." She looked at me, eyes red and pleading. "Please, just listen. I was drunk, tired, I didn't mean for it to happen. Just give me another chance." I felt my jaw tight. "No. You had your chance, Lisa. You threw it away. This is over." I slid the folder over to her, "And I think it's time you see what I've been planning." She finally looked at the photos, her face draining of color. Her breathing hitched, tears streaming down her cheeks. The betrayal was there, plain and ugly. She knew she had no defense left. At that moment, I realized this was the point of no return. I was finally in control, and she was about to learn the price of crossing me. I handed her the keys to her car and the divorce papers I'd prepared earlier. "You can take whatever's yours," I said coldly. "I don't want to see you again. When you leave today, don't bother coming back." She looked at me, broken and defeated. "You're doing this because you're hurt, right?" "No," I said, voice low and steady. "I'm doing this because I'm tired of being lied to, cheated on, and treated like an idiot. This isn't just about revenge. It's about making sure you never do this again to anyone." As she grabbed her things and left, I felt a strange sense of relief mixed with a cold emptiness. I'd finally taken back control, and I knew my life would never be the same. I'd learned a hard lesson. Trust can be shattered in a second, but revenge can be just as swift. And now I was finally free to move on. The silence that hit after she walked out was deafening. I stood there in the apartment, staring at the empty doorway, feeling a strange mix of satisfaction and hollow emptiness. All the planning, the waiting, the anger, it had culminated in this moment. I finally saw her for what she truly was, and honestly, part of me wanted to feel victorious. But mostly I felt drained, like I'd been fighting a war I didn't even want to be in. The apartment felt colder without her there. The world seemed quieter, less noisy with the chaos of her lies. I went to the window and looked out at the city, the rain still falling softly outside. My hands were clammy, my stomach still twisted, but I also felt something else: relief. I had done what I set out to do. She'd betrayed me, and I responded in kind. It was the kind of closure I'd been craving, even if it left a bitter taste. Later that afternoon, I started tidying up the apartment. I packed her clothes into a box, feeling each piece as I folded it: the sweater she always wore, the scarf she loved, even that stupid mug she'd bought at some boutique downtown. Each item reminded me of the life I thought we had, now shattered beyond repair. I set the box aside and looked around at the space that, until recently, was filled with her presence. As I was about to leave the apartment for the day, I found myself hesitating at the door. A part of me wanted to go after her, to tell her exactly how much she'd lost. But I knew better. That wasn't the point anymore. The point was that I'd taken control, that I'd finally stood tall and made her see she couldn't just cheat and walk away without consequences. I grabbed my phone and made a quick call to a lawyer. I needed to get the divorce process rolling, to make it official, to cut all ties. She'd cheated, lied, and betrayed me. There was no way I was going to pretend everything was fine anymore. I wanted out, and I wanted her to know I wasn't going to chase her or beg her to stay. No, I was done, completely done. The lawyer was professional but sympathetic. "You're doing the right thing," he said. "Once we get the paperwork sorted, she'll be served and this will be over. No more waiting, no more pain." I felt a flicker of relief at those words. I hadn't realized how heavy the burden of her betrayal had become until I started shedding it today. I'd be lying if I said I felt nothing, but underneath it all there was a strange sense of clarity, like I'd finally found my own footing again. That night I poured myself a glass of whiskey. I sat on the balcony, staring at the city lights shimmering through the rain. The cold air hit my face and I let out a long breath. My mind kept circling back to her, to the way she'd looked when she left, the lies she told, the betrayal she'd hidden behind her fake smile. I wondered if she'd ever feel the same pain, the same heartbreak I'd been carrying around. But I knew one thing for sure: no matter how much I hated her in that moment, I had to move on. She was out of my life now. I could finally breathe without that heavy weight pressing down on my chest. I promised myself I wouldn't let her ruin me. Still, I couldn't help but think about what I'd tell others if they asked. About trust, betrayal, revenge. About how sometimes the worst pain comes from those closest to you, and how the only way to heal is to take control and walk away. That's what I'd done, rewritten the ending on my terms. I knew I'd be okay in the end. But I also knew I'd never forget the taste of betrayal, how it made my stomach churn every time I thought about it. And that's okay. Because now I'm finally free to start over, to rebuild what was lost. If I had to give one piece of advice, it'd be this: never let anyone cheat on you and walk away without consequence. Sometimes the only way to reclaim your dignity is to take the hardest route, confront, fight, and then walk away knowing you're better off without them. I'm finally living proof of that. The days after I filed for divorce felt like a strange limbo. I was relieved, but also raw, like my skin had been peeled back, exposing every wound. I kept replaying everything in my head, trying to find some peace, some sense that I'd done the right thing. But truthfully, part of me was still angry, still burning with that need for her to feel exactly what I'd felt: betrayed, humiliated, lost. I started to focus on myself. It wasn't just about getting revenge. It was about reclaiming my life. I threw myself into work, Jim, anything that kept my mind busy. I refused to let her win by making me a shell of who I was. Still, every now and then I'd catch myself staring at the door, wondering if she'd show up, if she'd try to guilt me into taking her back. One evening I was at my favorite bar, nursing a drink and trying to drown out the noise of my thoughts, when I ran into an old friend, Mike. We'd known each other for years but hadn't seen much of each other lately. He looked at me differently, like he knew I'd been through hell. "Man, you look like you've been through the ringer," he said, raising an eyebrow. I shrugged. "Can't complain, just trying to move on." He leaned in closer, lowering his voice. "Word on the street is she's been trying to contact you, sending messages, begging to talk. I told her you're done, but you should know you're not the only one who's angry right now." That made my stomach tight. I'd suspected she'd try to reach out, but hearing it out loud made it real. I told him, "I don't want to hear a thing from her. I need to focus on myself. That's all that matters now." He nodded, eyes narrowing. "Listen, just be careful. People like her, they don't change overnight. If she's desperate enough to cheat while your dad's funeral is happening, I'd watch my back if I were you. That night, I sat alone in my apartment, reflecting on everything. I was starting to see how deep the betrayal ran. Not just her cheating, but the way she'd lied and manipulated from the start. I realized I'd overlooked some red flags, small things that now seemed glaringly obvious. The sudden coldness when I'd asked questions, her defensive attitude, the way she avoided eye contact when I got too close to the truth. It hit me that I'd been vulnerable, not just because of grief, but because I'd trusted her blindly. I put her on a pedestal and she'd shattered that without a second thought. Now I had to rebuild, but I knew I wouldn't do that by pretending everything was fine. The next day, I decided to take control of the situation. I called a lawyer again to finalize the divorce, making sure everything was in motion. I wanted it done, sealed, over with. I also started to think about how I'd handle her attempts to contact me. I made it clear to my lawyer that I didn't want to hear from her, not even a text. I was done with her lies, her manipulations. As I was packing up some of the remaining things, my phone buzzed. I saw her name on the screen. My heart skipped a beat. I hesitated, then let it go to voicemail. I knew she'd try again, but I didn't want to give her the satisfaction of talking to me. Instead, I kept my focus on what I had to do. Later that evening, I sat back and thought about how far I'd come. The pain, the anger, the betrayal, all of it had sharpened me. I was no longer the naive husband who trusted blindly. I was now someone who saw through lies and understood that sometimes the only way to get closure is to take back your power. I realized I'd been holding on to hope that she'd change, that she'd come clean, but that wasn't happening. No, I had to make that change myself. I couldn't let her define my future. I was tired of being the victim. It was time to be the one in control. That's when I decided. She tried to reach out multiple times, and each time I ignored her. But I knew I had to do one last thing, something final to really put an end to this chapter. I gathered the divorce papers, the evidence, and my resolve. I was going to hand her the keys to her freedom, literally. Next morning, I drove to her apartment, the papers folded in my hand, her keys in my pocket. My heart was pounding, not with fear, but with a sense of purpose. I rang her doorbell, and when she opened it, I looked her in the eye. She looked exhausted, desperate almost. "I want you to have this," I said, holding out the divorce papers. "It's over, all of it. The lies, the betrayal, the cheating. You can take your keys, your stuff, and go. Don't bother contacting me again." She paused, her eyes glossy, and reached out slowly for the papers. I handed them to her and watched as she realized this was the end. Her shoulders slumped and she nodded silently, unable to find words. I turned and walked away, closing the door behind me. In the silence that followed, I felt a strange calm settle over me, like I'd finally taken back my life. No more lies, no more betrayal, just me, finally free. And that, I think, is the best revenge of all. In the weeks that followed, I kept my distance from her completely. I blocked her number, deleted her from my social media, and made sure there was no way she could reach me. Honestly, I didn't want to see her face or hear her voice again. I felt lighter, like I'd finally exhaled after holding my breath for too long. But more than that, I felt liberated, like I'd reclaimed a part of myself I'd lost in all the betrayal and lies. Every morning now I wake up with a clearer head. The ache inside still lingers sometimes, but it's softer, more manageable. I've started to rebuild my life, going out more, focusing on my work, reconnecting with friends who support me. The anger has dulled, replaced by a strange sense of pride. I didn't let her destroy me. I fought back, I took control, and I walked away with my dignity intact. Looking back, the whole situation was a brutal lesson in trust, how fragile it really is, and how quickly it can shatter. But it also taught me something even more valuable. That revenge isn't just about payback, it's about reclaiming your power. I didn't lash out at her with threats or violence. I simply took what was mine, my dignity, my peace, and moved on. That's the real victory. To anyone out there dealing with a betrayal like mine, I'll say this. Trust is a fragile thing, but your self-respect is. When someone crosses that line, you have two choices: allow it to break you, or use it as a catalyst to become stronger. I chose the latter. I walked away, not because I was weak, but because I was tired of being the victim. and every day since. I remind myself that I deserve someone who respects me enough not to betray me, someone who values trust, honesty, and loyalty. Now, I'm rebuilding my life piece by piece. I've started dating again, cautiously, but with a new sense of what I want and what I won't tolerate. I've also learned that revenge, when done right, isn't about revenge at all. It's about justice, about making sure you don't let someone's betrayal define who you are. So to anyone who's been betrayed, know this: you're stronger than you think. You can take that pain, that anger, and turn it into something that propels you forward. Trust me, there's life beyond the betrayal. It's waiting for you on the other side, brighter and better than you ever imagined. All it takes is the courage to walk away and the resolve to never let someone's betrayal make you forget your worth.